Joining us today, Karina Aggarwal. She is this sprightly young lady who spent more than a decade in the Alcobev space as a consultant, as a brand expert across various spirits, immense knowledge. She's really a wonder. She was also an ex-journalist, formerly VP of Terai. Many of you know her as an ambassador for the brand, and she's got lots more up her sleeve as she continues with her directorship at Gigglewater Consultants, her own company. Karina, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Firstly, I didn't even know there was so much to know about alcohol and spirits. I mean, they call you the sort of wonder girl when it comes to, all there is to know about creating drinks and, knowing the secret ingredients. Tell us how you accumulated this wealth of knowledge when it comes to spirits.
Completely by chance. I started, post my journalism, I started working with a publishing house of sorts, and one of their magazines was a beverage magazine. And at that point, I drank mojitos with extra sugar syrup if someone held a gun to my head. But what ended up happening was, in order for me to not sound stupid when I had to interview winemakers and brewers and distillers, I decided to just research everything that I could. And I had a background of like anthropology, psychology and English literature, so my go-to was to the books or to the internet.
Yeah.
So I just started to study and learn as much as I could about the process of, how something came together. And then I ended up meeting really amazing people, and when I tasted the product with them, it just fit really beautifully. And that's what I first fell in love with. And so I continued to study, wine, whiskey, cognac, various things along the way. And it just very organically went from me just writing about it to me training people in this space and getting everyone excited about what was there. And Gigglewater started as a blog originally, because I was writing for a B2B magazine. Okay. But I was coming across so many tidbits that were really exciting, and my friends were like, oh, I didn't know this, for drinks that they were drinking all the time. So it just started as a blog to, share these little fun facts, so to speak, and it snowballed from there.
Amazing. And even it's a career spanning over a decade or so far.
Yeah.
Still young, but you've achieved so much already in the sense that you're judging competitions internationally, representing brands, being asked for your expert knowledge. Take us through some of the key milestones and what it's been like for you as a young woman in the Alcobev industry.
So, like I said, one thing sort of led to the other. What's been exciting is that I joined the Alcobev space at a time when it was moving from just a lot of sort of imported products and imported, international brand ambassadors who were coming in and sort of training our industry, to our homegrown industry sort of rising up and doing its own thing over the last few years. So for me, it was really nice to be part of, that. But also how I learned about it was how I learned about beverage in general also is like being invited to a lot of these international wine competitions, beer competitions, where you're sitting with your peers from around the world, understanding and tasting with them, how does it work everywhere else. In terms of my journey, like I said, it's been great because I've met some people who have been very generous in terms of teaching me and sort of taking me under their wing in some ways. But the Indian Alcobev industry has been and is still largely a male sort of space. And so the first few years, I will credit it in saying that it has made me grow a thicker skin in a lot of ways.
Nice.
But it's a little sad that I think, and it's not just been my experience, but when I started in this space, there were outside of as writers or in the marketing space, there were very few women who had studied beverage and who were looking at sort of increasing their knowledge in that space, or showing expertise in that space rather. And I realized that there's a tendency to very often put it down to what a woman looks like, how she dresses, who she's having an affair with, sometimes as blatant as that.
Right.
But the last thing that would come out was the knowledge, the time or the skill that she's, that's the last thing they would give credit to. I see that changing quite a bit now because there is a lot more representation. So there are more women in the space as working across the board, from bartenders to distillers to whatever. And it's still a long way off, but
is it an added bias because you're a woman, but you're also young, or you're also single? Like you said, they're speculating who you're having an affair with.
I don't think it mattered. Even when I wasn't single, or even when I was with someone, there were, it's always that. So it's always about. And for a man, they wouldn't question it. If a successful man, they wouldn't question how much he knew. But with a woman, they're not sure if she's done the work, really.
Got it.
Which is really strange, because to be in that room, typically a woman would have had to do a lot more, to even enter a room like that. So I feel like that's changing, because now it's not. It's more common to see women in these kinds of spaces. In the last few years is when, earlier all of these panels that would happen, no one would blink an eye at the omission of women or it being an all-male panel. Now it's sort of glaring if there isn't representation, and that's a nice space to be.
Shift, yeah.
And I know the criticism is very often, why should it be, female chef or female bartender? And I think that it's really important for us to do that right now. Everyone that's put in the work would really love to be evaluated based solely on merit, right? But you can only do that when you start from the same space. And right now, women in most industries, as with Alcobev, start so far behind that it's not fair to judge them on the same, I mean, I think you can, but also we need to tell these stories. So we need to have articles talking about female brewers and distillers, because girls out there will know that there is the possibility of a career in this space. Where even 10 years ago, there wasn't.
No, I was just going to ask that, because, apart from acquiring a skill, when you're talking about actually building a business in this space, there's also a lot more that goes into it in terms of dealing with distribution, regulators, etc., which again may be perceived as a man's domain.
Yes, and it still largely is in terms of how it's functioning in India, or certain parts of India rather. But there has been no scope, I think, for women to enter that space, because for various reasons, just because it hasn't been done before, and there haven't been women working in the space of, like, there's a very specific sales role, but now you'll see a lot more women working in Alcobev sales than when I started in this space.
So what's changed, do you think? Is it also because they're catering to a new consumer, or is it a conscious shift to just include a lot more women in the space as well?
Both. I think people have also realized that when there are more women in, even at a bar, for instance, working at the bar, you create a safer environment and you create a more hospitable, in some way, environment. There are conversations around it. We've been talking about it a lot more than we had before, and there are, of course, men and women who are working actively to say, let's change some of that. Let's try and allow for more representation or more opportunities. And I think, social, to some extent, social media sort of helped this, because we are seeing women, who have certain skills, certain knowledge in different areas, come out and say, this is what I know, and get recognition and get recognized for that in a way that isn't bogged down by a larger industry necessarily.
And today we do have women who are spearheading new artisanal brands.
So many.
Yeah, many of them. So clearly, like you said, it wasn't done till now, but something is changing.
Yes.
And perhaps it'll start to be a lot more accepted going along. But what do you think is, when you're watching this industry evolve, share with us perhaps, the most difficult part of working in Alcobev in India, as well as the most exciting part, because it's a huge industry, and today, of course, we're expanded beyond the original, let's say whiskey and whatever else, to all kinds of gin, tequila, and so much more that's being developed both locally as well as, of course, people expanding knowledge globally.
So I think the most difficult part is working around the legislations and regulations and laws in India that are prohibitive in many ways. And it's a process. I've seen even that change. Different states function a lot better now than they used to 5 years ago even. They are allowing for more opportunity in that sense, but that's a hassle. The most exciting part, I would say, is that there's so much scope on both the consumer side of things and the brand development side of things, because we've seen for really long now what's being done outside. And over the last few years, entrepreneurship in the space of craft spirits, wines, whatever, has become a lot more prominent. And of course, it's sort of one feeds the other, because our consumers travel, they understand this lifestyle, they want to come back to India and have some of that. They are curious now, they are reading, whether it was reading articles or watching shows like MasterChef, or just seeing stuff on social media where there's a new gin launching every few days, and they want to have a collection of it. So all of these things are, there's just so much, it's so exciting, because you can train an entire sort of audience of people on what to think about a certain category or what to think about a certain brand. Over the last few years, I've actually been surprised at a lot of the nuance that a typical consumer actually gets. They can identify now one craft product from another. They will tell you very early on where they see longevity and where they see heft to a brand, versus where they're like, this probably won't do that well. And it's not just because they've tasted them and said that's a rubbish product. They can see how a brand is functioning and what has worked and not, and that's amazing.
That's clear. That's definitely an evolution, I think, and it's everyone likes to know these days,
Yeah.
But okay, tell me, the heavy hitters in the industry are still, of course, those largely male, and when you're kind of telling them that this is going to work or that's not going to work, when was it that you found that they're starting to listen to you and take you more seriously? At what stage?
I think, like I said, because it was sort of one led to another, when I started on the consulting sort of space, the people who came to me, I was lucky. I was lucky that I didn't particularly have to go around like pitching, in that sense. There were a few years where, I had to go and say, let's do this and let's do that. I also moved cities at that time, which was a little difficult, because when I moved from Bombay to Delhi had no concept of any of the things that I was
And why
trying
did you
to
move
do.
from Bombay to Delhi?
I moved because I had been in a relationship with someone.
And then you come to Delhi.
I'm
not sure any state is easier regulation-wise, but in terms of bias, I'm not sure.
Yeah, Delhi is not my cup of tea. It wasn't then, it certainly isn't now. But I moved because I'd been in a relationship for 2 years at that point, and I kept saying I would move, but I really didn't want to. And then we adopted a pup, and before she got too old, I wanted to move. So yeah, I don't have the man, but I have 2 pups now. So it was a win-win overall.
A win-win, yes.
But it was interesting, because I think there were a lot more, people who were doing what I was doing in Bombay in some respects. So the brand owners in Bombay understood that there's certain like workshops or conversations, communication, and these were still early days where everyone was creating a social media account for their brand, for instance. But here that wasn't the case, really. But Delhi was leading the charge by far, so they didn't really care necessarily what was happening in Bombay at that point, and that changed over the first 2 or 3 years, my first few years here in Delhi. Going back to what I was saying, so I was lucky in the sense that the people that came to me already saw value in what I could do for them, and then each successive sort of project that I did meant that people were seeing an output, or whether they were talking to people that I'd worked with already, and they said, okay, this is working. So they would come to me for very specific things to say, okay, I need help in, say, sometimes recipe creation, sometimes just communication, or sometimes saying, this brand has been there forever, but we don't know what to do with it, and we need conversation around it. We want to rejig it. And for me, what was exciting is that I've never had to have the same day over and over. I like sort of going into the background of something and then saying what can we draw out from it, but also contextualize to today's audience. And I went from then writing to when things got more visual and got more, like Instagram Reels now, but there were videos before that, there was YouTube. I felt like that was an easier way for me to connect with an audience because it was more casual. And since you're talking about drink in the first place, which is something that's social and fun, it just made more sense. So, that the form of how I was sort of administering this information changed along the way.
And then you also, of course, had this role at Terai, which became kind of a signature role, so as to say, in the sense that you were associated with it so strongly. Really helped to build that brand when it first launched. That too during COVID.
Yes. So I'd signed on just about a month before COVID, and I'd signed on as a consultant with just a few days a month. But over those and I realized soon after joining that it was just a very small team. Basically, the owner Shekhar, the designer of the brand, and I, who were working at that point. And so I ended up sort of building teams out, and I realized a few months in that I'd put so much of myself into it in a way that it had become my baby. So then eventually I took on a larger role. But 2020 was the year that one of the things that I wanted to do was to work a lot more with homegrown brands, because I felt like there was so much potential there. But a lot of them were creating great brands, but they weren't necessarily marketing them well or positioning them well. And I felt like I could be effective there.
Right.
And then Terai came about, and there was already so much that that they had done in creating the brand that was so right and right up my alley in that sense. And so it worked really well, and I spent about 3 years building out that brand and creating some fun things for them. And this was before this whole wave of new Goa-based India. Yeah. There were, of course, a few, the Strangers and the and Greater Than, etc., that had already done a good job. But there were about 3 in the market at that point.
I love that. No, and I think it's both exciting and challenging for any new brand when it comes to the alcohol market. Correct me if I'm wrong. But like, so I think that now that we're seeing, such a wide spectrum, I think it's pretty exciting.
Yeah. And we decided to launch, and I think now in retrospect it feels ridiculous, but we decided to launch during COVID, because one of the things that I noticed was that a lot of journalists kept, getting in touch with me saying, we need content for articles, tell me what you're making at home, tell me what you're drinking, what can people do if they have basic stuff like kitchen ingredients. And everyone was sort of clamoring for this lifestyle pieces once things had calmed down. So I said maybe this will work in our benefit, because if we launch, perhaps the PR will sort of come to us, because there wasn't exciting stuff that was going on. And so we took that gamble, and it paid off. And it was really fun, because within a week of us launching, I think 3 other brands said we are also launching. So, but it was good.
Sounds awesome. So, you're now, of course, continuing with projects at Gigglewater. I know that you've got something up your sleeve. I'm not sure how much you're going to tell me today, but what's next?
A few different things. One of the things that I started on recently is a Mahua Spirit project, which is this originally it's a tribal recipe for the Mahua flower, the spirit that they make out of that. And I'm getting in at a sort of branding and strategy phase, so I think there's a lot of scope there. And I think India is missing that one, what is our drink? Like collective. So maybe I hope that Mahua can be it. I mean, I'm part Goan, so I have allegiance to Feni in a way, but I understand that Feni is a little difficult to take to for most people. So I think Mahua might be
kind of like the Indian tequila.
That space. Yeah, hopefully.
Okay,
Let's see if we do a good job, then maybe.
Okay, exciting. And we're going to be watching this space to know what comes out of this. You've also, of course, been through a very trying time personally. You've come out shining, and I'm so happy to see that. But tell us what happened, because last year you were diagnosed with cancer.
Yes.
Must have come as a shock. Must have been completely unexpected.
Yes, completely unexpected. So this happened last March, and I went for a sort of regular checkup, in the sense that I had a gynecologist tell me to go and get an ultrasound, but it still came out of the blue, you know, and it's not something you ever plan for and expect.
Not at all.
And I think that's actually, I realized that that's a problem, because on paper my sisters and I are very clearly high risk, you know, for say cancer. My grandmother and two of my uncles on my mom's side have all gone through it. But somehow it just never registered to me that it's something that we have to watch for, take care of, test. And I've realized, especially over the last year with conversations with so many women, that one of the things we tend to do is we prioritize a lot of other stuff before our health, unless it's sort of glaring us in the face, you know. And it's something that I knew I needed to do. I needed to get sort of checked, and I should have been doing that more regularly. But I just put it off, and for no reason. I wasn't scared, or it just didn't, it felt cumbersome.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that I've been talking about since, to sort of advocate for women getting screened and going and doing this, and you know, because early detection is key for breast cancer, and for most, but like especially in this case, and it's something that's fairly simple for us to do. There has been a lot more conversation about it, I feel, over the last couple of years than ever before. But I think there's still a lot more that we need to talk about.
What was the process like? Was it intimidating, overwhelming? You know, having to go through chemo?
So I had the whole shebang. So I had to undergo surgery, chemo, radiation, all of it.
Oh, wow.
I think also because of my age, my oncologist really wanted to sort of, you know, make sure that I don't have to go through this 10 years down the line.
Wow.
So sort of blast my body with all of that. So, but there's nothing that can prepare you for it. In some ways, it's you think you know, and you think, you know, even though I'd spoken to people and read quite a bit, when it gets hard, and when things start, and when you're in bed just feeling really terrible and you're nauseous, like speaking and texting is difficult, there's nothing that makes that better, really. But I mean, but it's one of those things that the only way to, you know, to deal with it is to go through it. And I mean, I still feel in a lot of ways like I'm in the thick of it, but where I am now is, of course, a lot better than, you know, where I was. And it was nice. I decided to share what was happening to me a few weeks in. And it was nice. I'm really glad that I did, because I was sort of overwhelmed with how many women, sort of not just women, like how many people wrote to me just sending support, but also how many women who were in the times that I shared since to get screened, how many of them wrote to me and said, I booked an appointment, you know, this is happening tomorrow, I'm a little nervous, I'm taking my mom and my sisters. And that was good, because I realized that there's a taboo somehow attached to cancer that I don't fully understand yet. I'm not sure where it comes from, but there is this sort of shame involved with it. And so even in families where it's present, it's not openly talked about. You know, it's almost the he who shall not be named kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely.
And I don't know why, but I'm glad that, you know, I think a lot of people feel that if it could happen to someone like her, it could happen to me.
Right.
Which is, I mean, good. I mean, you should
it is good that you're talking about it, because people will be able to relate if it's somebody that they like you said, is someone that they feel is
that
like
doesn't
them.
fit the mold,
Yeah.
so to speak,
Yeah.
in that sense. It's not something you would have expected.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's been hard, and
Well,
it's getting better.
I love that you're coming out on top of this.
Thank you.
I know you're back to traveling for your work, for your personal life, in terms of doing fun things. And I love the spirit, and I think that's really what you're all about. I mean, you've created a space for yourself in an industry where there was no such role or or person, and you're a really highly respected person in that space. And on top of that, you've bounced back from this, and you're already on to your next big thing. So I'm really excited for you.
Thank you.
I know, Karina, that you're also passionate about bringing women together in the Alcobev space. I know in the past you were working on something. Is that something in the future that you're still looking to create, a space for women in Alcobev?
I would like to. I think, I think when we spoke of a couple of years ago, I was hoping to create something for women and other minorities as far as representation goes within bars. In India, I would like to get back to that. Other things took precedence, unfortunately. But it'll happen.
Yeah.
It'll happen. Hopefully in 2024, fingers crossed. But
And are you seeing more women in the decision-making areas as
yes,
well? Yes,
a lot more. And also, you were mentioning like the big companies.
Yeah.
We have a lot of women
that are now there.
that are now at the top.
Well, I know Diageo, of course.
Yes.
That's the big one.
Yeah,
Um,
and there are, like, even with Beam Century India and things like that. So there are women in very, very important positions who it just changes everything.
Of
it
course.
just automatically changes stuff. We see a lot more. We see people react also to women in a different way when. There's that energy that comes in. It's a different kind of face that than they've been used to from a brand ambassador perspective. So brands are looking at hiring a lot more women in that sense.
Like, for example, the women at Diageo, but if they're just running a company, do you see them actually making an impact in some way?
I think they want to. A lot of them want to sort of help other women up, and so. So they'll at least keep an eye out for that.
Okay, there is that sense.
So there is that sense of saying, let's have teams where there are, more women. Maybe not equal yet. Maybe it's not easy to hire enough women, but like, I think in marketing spaces, in beverage marketing spaces and things like that, there are now a lot of women that are working in that space. So there is skill there quite a bit. In terms of like Alcobev know-how specifically, that's also growing.
How many women-led brands do you foresee coming out of this entire new, gamut, that we've seen crop up over the last couple of years? How many more, or how many of these do you feel are going to emerge even stronger and really make a mark going forward? You yourself are launching one. I mean, even if it's
not my own.
But you are the face of it. You are building the strategy for it. So, like I said, I think women-led brands are also going to be creating waves going forward.
Yes, so we've already seen a few over the last few years. There will certainly be a lot more that come up along the way. But now that we have women, like I said, as distillers, as brewers, winemakers for a while now, it's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Who's the winemaker?
There's actually, she's more a viticulturist than a winemaker, but Charisma Wines.
Karnataka, right? Yeah. Lovely. So,
and also Rivello in Nashik. They are,
So you've got a good view of what's happening all over the country.
Yes. I think I may have snoozed a bit last year on certain things.
I think that's allowed.
But I think it's allowed. I'm learning to be patient.
It's okay. Sometimes you realize nothing much changes.
That's true, actually. Yeah.
But like you said, it's really all about pursuing your dream. And while you've never necessarily quoted that in the past, I think.
So I feel like as much as we tell kids, have a dream and like follow your passion and stuff, I think it's more important actually to find what you're good at, recognize what you're good at, and then use that in a way that, in a field that excites you. Because it's not, I may have wanted to, I spent most of my life wanting to be an archaeologist, specifically an Egyptologist. This is not something I planned at all. But that didn't particularly go as planned, and then I realized what I was effectively doing was, telling stories, getting people excited about food and beverage, and I was excited about that. And I think it's something that we should, every time we say, follow your dream, follow your passion, it should come with a caveat. Like, you can't be a dancer if you have two left feet.
True.
And all the work that you do will get you somewhere, but you're never going to be as good as someone who is inherently, skilled in that space.
Absolutely.
So,
and if you are a woman who's passionate about the Alcobev space, there's nothing stopping you today.
Yes, nothing.
Karina, thanks so much for joining us on the show. Great chatting with you here today, and we hope you stay healthy and continue to rise and shine as you have always done over the last few years.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.